Good afternoon. Hoping some of my bullfrogs will be on here. We're going to start our new book today. This one right here. Dragon of the Red Dawn. We're going to read this one today. Hopefully y'all were able to get your own copy. But if not, no big deal, because we're going to read it and we're going to hopefully finish this chapter book this week. Hey, I see some of my friends coming on here. Glad y'all are here. So Miss Betterton, showed you the book that I was reading, the first book I read. This is the second book I'm reading. It's called Educated. It's not for teachers, it's for everybody. It's a memoir. These are my favorite kinds of books to read. I've told y'all in class, I love books that are realistic. Memoirs are usually books that people have written about their own lives and their take on their lives or whatever. And someday, maybe, if I'm ever brave enough or want to just try it out, I might try to write my own memoir. But this is a historical fiction, and the reason we love Magic Treehouse books is because they're fun, because they're fiction, but they're usually historical in some way, meaning they travel to another country or they use real historical figures, and we can learn about people from history and also places in history. And then she just combines her fictional characters, Jack and Annie, and the Magic Treehouse obviously is fictional. We wish it wasn't. It would be so cool to have a Magic Treehouse. But anyway, so we're going to get started with Chapter 1. Hopefully more will join. Glad to see y'all here, though. And make sure and push the little icons, the little emojis at the bottom. And when you like something or when you think something's funny or you love something, you can push the heart. And that just shows me that you're listening and you're engaged and you agree with, whatever. It's just a fun way to communicate. Okay, so this book has 10 chapters. And let me see here. Let me get past the prologue and all the things. Here, okay, so chapter 1 is called For Merlin's Sake. All right, here we go. Tap, tap, tap. Jack was dreaming that a white bird was pecking at his window. Tap, tap. A red bird appeared and pecked with the white bird. Tap, tap. Jack, wake up, said Annie. Jack opened his eyes. They're here, said Annie. Who, the birds? Said Jack. No, Teddy and Kathleen. Annie rushed to the window and waved outside. They're tossing pebbles at our windows. Teddy and Kathleen? Jack jumped out of the bed and joined Annie at the window. The two young enchanters of Camelot were standing in Jack and Annie's front yard. They were dressed in long, dark cloaks. They smiled and waved up at Jack and Annie. Merlin must have sent them, said Jack. Teddy made a walking motion with his fingers and pointed toward the Frog Creek woods. Annie nodded eagerly. They want us to meet them at the treehouse, said Jack. Hurry and get dressed before Mom and Dad wake up. Annie started out of Jack's room. When she got to the door, she turned. Oh, and don't forget to bring the wand of Dianthus. Do you remember what that was? The wand of Dianthus, that was the unicorn's horn, or it's shaped like a unicorn's horn, but it's a magical wand that I think it was Merlin that gave it to him. Jack threw on his clothes. He grabbed his backpack and peeked inside. The wand was there. Jack put his pack on his back. Then he slipped quietly downstairs and out the door. Annie was standing on the front porch. Let's go, she said. Jack and Annie ran across their yard and dashed up the sidewalk. I wonder why they came for us, said Annie. I wonder why we're going, said Jack. Or where we're going, said Jack. I wonder everything, said Annie. Jack and Annie crossed the street and hurried into the Frog Creek woods. The early March trees looked weary from winter, gray and brown with no leaves on them yet. Look, said Annie, out of breath. They're waiting for us. Jack looked up. Teddy and Kathleen were waving from the window of the magic treehouse. Jack grabbed the rope ladder and started up. Annie followed. When Jack and Annie climbed inside the treehouse, they threw their arms around Teddy and Kathleen. "We're so glad to see you," cried Annie. "And we're happy to see you also," said Kathleen. The sea girl's lovely water blue eyes sparkled. "Indeed," said Teddy. "It has been too long." "What's our mission this time?" asked Jack. "Where's Merlin sending us?" Teddy glanced at Kathleen. "I fear Merlin does not know we are here," said Teddy. We have come not at his bidding, but for his sake." "What does that mean?" asked Jack. "Merlin is not well," said Kathleen. "He complains that he is getting old and feeble, and that life is full of sorrows. He does not eat or sleep." "Oh, no," said Annie. "All of Camelot wishes to help him," said Teddy, "but no one knows quite how." "Well, what can we do to help?" asked Jack. Teddy picked up a book from the corner of the treehouse. "Throughout the ages, people all over the world have sought the secrets of happiness," he said. "Morgan wants you to search for 4 of these secrets to share with Merlin. She believes that the first one might be found here." Jack took the book from Teddy. He read the title aloud. "A Journey to Old Japan." Here's what it says. Can you see that? "Oh, wow, we've been to Japan before," said Annie. "Before we met you," Jack said to Teddy and Kathleen, "we had an adventure with the ninjas." "Yes, Morgan told us," said Teddy, "but she said that on that journey you visited the countryside. This time you must travel to the capital city." "Are you guys coming with us?" asked Annie. "I'm afraid not," said Kathleen. "We must return to Camelot now to help Morgan. Since Merlin has fallen ill, she has taken on much of his work." "You have the wand, do you not?" asked Teddy. "Yep," said Jack. He reached into his backpack and took out the wand of Dianthus. The spiraled wand was shaped like a unicorn's horn. "With the help of the wand, you will make your own magic," said Teddy. "That's what Merlin said when he gave it to us," said Annie. "But he didn't say how," said Jack. "It is very simple," said Teddy. "The wand has 3 rules. First, it only works for the good of others. The wand can never be used for selfish reasons. Second, the wand works only after you have tried your very hardest without its help," said Kathleen. "Do not attempt to use its magic too quickly. And third, the wand only works with a command of 5 words," said Teddy. "So you must choose your words carefully." "Can we review all that, please?" asked Jack. "Don't worry, I've got it," said Annie. "We have to go. We have to help Merlin as soon as we can." "If the treehouse takes us to Japan, how will you go back to Camelot?" Jack asked Teddy and Kathleen. Teddy and Kathleen held up their hands. They each wore a sparkling blue ring. "Our magic rings will take us home," said Kathleen. "And this book from Camelot's library will bring you back home to Frog Creek," said Teddy. After you have completed your mission, he picked up another book lying in a corner. It was the book about Pennsylvania that Jack and Annie had used on their first magic treehouse adventures. "Thanks," said Jack. "Goodbye," said Annie. "Take good care of Merlin." Oh, wait, hang on. Oh, yeah, there's no picture there. "We will try," said Kathleen. She and Teddy raised their magic rings to their lips. They whispered words too softly for Jack and Annie to hear, then blew on the rings. As they blew, the young sorcerers began to fade into the cool morning air. In a moment, they had disappeared completely. Silence filled the treehouse. Annie turned to Jack. "Ready?" she said. Jack nodded. He pointed to the cover of the Japan book. "I wish we could go there," he said. "All right, so say this with me." The tree house started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. All right, here's a picture of them blowing on their rings and disappearing. Kathleen and Teddy. All right, let's see what happens. Chapter 2. It's called The Imperial Garden. Jack opened his eyes. Soft morning light shone across the floor of the treehouse. Pink flowers bloomed on a branch outside the window. Jack and Annie were wearing brown baggy pants and brown silk robes with blue sashes. On their feet were stiff white socks and straw sandals. Jack's backpack had turned into a burlap bag. "Are we wearing bathrobes?" asked Jack. "I think they're called kimonos," said Annie. "Oh, right," said Jack. "Where'd we land exactly?" Jack and Annie looked out the window. Here's what they saw. So here they are in their treehouse. There's where they landed. Doesn't that look so beautiful? Waterfalls and beautiful landscaping. Cool buildings. Below the treehouse was a beautiful garden filled with cherry trees and long-leafed willows. A waterfall tumbled into a sparkling green pool. "Wow," said Annie. Jack opened the Japan book and found a painting that looked like the garden. He read aloud to Annie. In the 1600s, the imperial garden surrounded the imperial palace in the capital city of Japan. The city was called Edo. In the mid-1800s, its name was changed to Tokyo. "Tokyo," said Annie. "I've always wanted to go to Tokyo." "Me too," said Jack. He read on. The late 1600s in Japan were years of peace and prosperity. Art and culture thrived. But it was a time when the country was completely closed to the outside world. No one was allowed to come in. The citizens of Edo were frequently checked to make sure they had passports. "What's a passport exactly?" said Annie. "It's an official booklet that says who you are," said Jack. "It also lists the different countries you traveled to." He read more. Anyone who did not have a passport was considered a spy and punished severely. "Uh-oh," said Annie. "We don't have passports." "Yeah, that's a problem," said Jack. "Hey, what if we use the wand of Dianthus to make passports?" said Annie. "Good idea," said Jack. He peeked inside his bag. Good, the wand of Dianthus was there. Wait, said Annie. "We can't. Remember the rules? We can only use the magic wand for the good of others." "Oh, right," said Jack. "And we have to try our hardest before we use the wand," said Annie. "We haven't tried anything yet," said Jack. "I guess we should just start looking for a secret of happiness and hope no one catches us," said Annie. "Shh," said Jack. "Listen." A bell was ringing in the distance. The ringing grew louder. Then came the sound of horses. Jack and Annie crouched down. They raised their heads just high enough to peek out the window. Through the flowery tree branches they saw a small procession coming through the garden. The man leading the procession was ringing a bell. 2 men walked behind them, holding up banners. Behind them, 4 men rode slowly on horseback. They all wore baggy trousers and puffy shirts. Their heads were shaved except for knots of black hair. Each had 2 swords, a long one and a short one, hanging from his belt. At the very end of the procession rode a man in a billowing purple robe and a small purple hat. Red tassels hung from the bridle of his large black horse. Jack looked at their research book again. He found a picture that looked like the man on the black horse. He read the caption to himself. In the 1600s, the military ruler known as Shogun lived in the center of the imperial garden in a palace that had hundreds of rooms. Here's a picture. Shogun. "That last guy is a shogun," Jack whispered to Annie. "He lives in a big palace in the garden." He kept reading. Often the shogun's warriors traveled with him. They were called samurai. "Oh, man," whispered Jack. "Those other guys are samurai." He and Annie had barely escaped an armored samurai on their earlier trip to Japan. Samurai were excellent horsemen, well trained in the arts of fighting. The code of the samurai was strict. Samurai did not show their feelings. They had great powers of concentration. "They're gone," said Annie. Jack looked out the window. The shogun and his samurai warriors had disappeared down a tree-shaded dirt road. "We should get out of the Imperial Garden fast," said Jack. "If we stay here, we're just asking to be caught." "Well, how do we get out?" asked Annie. Jack looked in the Japan book. He found a map of Edo. "Look," he said, pointing at the map. "We have to get over this bridge that leads away from the Imperial Garden into that city. The bridge is on the east side of the garden." "The morning sun is over there," said Annie, squinting into the sunlight, "so that must be east. Let's climb down and head that way, because remember, the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west every day." "Good plan. Then we'll be walking in the opposite direction of those samurai," said Jack. "Right," said Annie. She started down the rope ladder. "Be careful," said Jack. "We don't want anyone to see us sneaking around the Imperial Garden." Jack put the Japan book into his burlap bag and slung the bag over his shoulder. As he stepped onto the ladder, he nearly tripped on his kimono. "Oh, brother," he said. He held up the cloth and carefully climbed down. Jack joined Annie on a wide path. A gust of dry wind carried petals from cherry trees through the air. The long branches of the willows swayed over the grass. Jack and Annie began heading east, keeping their eyes and ears open for more people. They walked past flower beds and big rocks. They walked around a pond with swans. They started down a narrow lane between blossoming cherry trees. Just as they came out from under the trees, Jack and Annie saw 4 men strolling toward them. One man was shorter and older than the others. He wore a straw hat and a tattered brown coat and used a walking stick. The other 3 had shaved heads with topknots, and 2 swords hung from each of their belts. "Samurai," whispered Jack. "Yikes," said Annie. "Run," said Jack. Jack and Annie turned around and started running back down the narrow lane. Jack heard the men running after them. "Halt!" cried the samurai. Jack grabbed Annie's hand and they stumbled to a halt. Out of breath, they turned to face the 3 samurai who were rushing toward them. "Who are you?" one of the samurai barked. He was holding up his sword. "Why do you run from us? Are you spies?" Just as Jack was about to answer, he heard a voice shout, "Baku Koto!" The man with the walking stick and straw hat was hurrying toward them. "Baku Koto, what are you doing here?" he called out to Jack and Annie. "Why did you not wait for me at the bridge?" Chapter 3. We're going to go ahead and read Chapter 3 today. It's called Basho. Basho. B-A-S-H-O. The 3 samurai turned to the man with the walking stick. "You know them, master?" one asked. "Yes, of course," the man said. "This boy and girl are Baku and Koto, my best students." "Hi, master," said Annie, pretending she knew who the man was. "We couldn't find the bridge, so we came here to look for you," said Jack. "And now you have found me," said the man. "I am sorry you were frightened by my friends." The samurai put away his sword. "Forgive me," he said, bowing before Jack and Annie. So here's a picture. Wonder who this guy is that saved the day for Jack and Annie. "Sure, no problem," said Annie. Oops, excuse me, I'm having technical difficulties with my paper here. Okay. "Sure, no problem," said Annie. The samurai turned to the small man. "We will leave you with your students now," he said. "Thank you, most honored master, for your visit with us today." All 3 warriors bowed deeply before the man. Then they walked away. Why did the samurai call the small man most honored master? Jack wondered. When the samurai were gone, the man turned to Jack and Annie. His eyes twinkled. "I believe you are safe now," he said. "Thanks," said Annie, "but I'm afraid we're not Baku and Koto." "No, you are not," said the man. "But you are not spies either, are you?" "No," said Jack. "I did not think so," said the man. "That is why I thought you needed my help." "Thank you," said Jack. "You are most welcome," said the man. Now perhaps you will tell me who you really are and how you came to be here in the Imperial Garden." "Our names are Jack and Annie," said Jack, "and we—" He paused. It seemed impossible to explain. Teddy and Kathleen's visit, Merlin's sorrow, Morgan's research book. "We came here to search for a secret of happiness," said Annie. The man smiled. "I believe that is something we all seek," he said. "But you must be very careful, Jack and Annie. The Shogun does not allow foreigners into our country. If you do not have passports, you could be caught and punished." "We know," said Annie. "What should we do?" "Perhaps you should travel with me today," said the man. "You can continue to be my students, Basho and Koto." "Good plan," said Jack. "You must remember, seek harmony with your surroundings," said the man. "Observe the people of Edo and do as they do. If you do not stand out, you will not be noticed by the samurai." "Got it," said Annie. "Seek harmony with your surroundings. Observe the people of Edo and do as they do," Jack repeated to himself. "Come," said the man. He started walking briskly through the garden. Jack and Annie hurried after him. "Excuse me, but what's your name?" Annie said. "My friends call me Basho," the man answered. "Basho? That's a cute name," said Annie. "And why did the samurai call you most honored master?" asked Jack. "Because I am their teacher," said Basho. "Well, what do you teach them?" asked Jack. Basho smiled. "Today they learned how to listen to a cricket in a woodpile," he said, "and how to think like a frog." Think like a frog? Well, frogs, y'all know how to think like a frog? "Cool," said Jack. Those must be warrior skills, he thought. Special ways to listen for an enemy or jump around with a sword. He remembered how ninjas use secrets of nature to fight their enemies. Basho led Jack and Annie through a wooden gate in a high wall. They walked over a wide stone bridge that crossed a moat. When they came to the other side of the bridge, they followed a path that led to a small boat dock on a river. 3 fishermen were loading wicker baskets into a long, flat-bottomed boat. Hundreds of shiny little fish were inside each basket. Basho walked over to the fisherman. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, Master Basho," the fisherman said. All of them bowed. Everyone seems to know Basho, Jack thought. May my students and I ride with you down the river?" asked Basho. These papers in this book are so wonky. Okay, here we go. "Oh, yes, of course, Master Basho," one of the men said. "We would be most honored to carry you in our humble boat." "Thank you," said Basho. Jack and Annie followed Basho onto the deck of the boat and sat next to the wicker baskets. One of the fishermen untied the boat, and the others used long poles to push it away from the dock. The men began poling down the river. The fishing boat floated under a series of bridges, moving in and out of shadows and glittering light. All right, so here's a picture of them on the boat. There's Jack and Annie and Basho. As it passed under one of the bridges, it scraped the bottom of the river. Basho, Jack, and Annie were thrown forward. "Forgive us, master," one of the fishermen called to Basho. "The river is very shallow." "There has been no rain for a long time," said another fisherman. "It is very worrisome to us." "Yes, it worries me too," said Basho. "What's everyone so worried about?" Annie asked Basho. "When the weather is very dry, the people of Edo worry about fire," said Basho. 25 years ago, during a dry spell, half of our city was destroyed by a terrible fire. Thousands died. "Oh, that's awful," said Annie. "Yes, since then, everyone has worked hard to rebuild the capital," said Basho. "Edo is now even more beautiful than before. In fact, along this riverbank are many new castles of the samurai. See, there one hides now." Basho pointed at a steepy, rocky cliff above the riverbank. Jack shaded his eyes as he looked at the curved roof and high stone walls of a samurai castle. Its largest room is called the 1,000-mat hall, said Basho. What does that mean? Asked Jack. It means the room can hold 1,000 floor mats, said Basho. Cool, said Annie. Basho, where do you live? Basho smiled. My castle is on the other side of the great bridge, he said. Jack wondered how many mats Basho's castle could hold. Beyond the steep cliffs, the boat traffic grew heavier. Now there were many boats floating on the wide river. Big sailboats, barges loaded with lumber, and ferries filled with passengers holding parasols. The fishing boat glided toward a crowded dock next to a market. In the market, thousands of gleaming fish were laid out on tables. Men and women also sold fish and other sea creatures from baskets that hung from poles across their shoulders. Shrimp, tuna, octopus, eel, they shouted. Wait for us while we deliver the fish, Basho said to Jack and Annie. Then we will travel further on the river. The fishermen tied up the boat. Jack and Annie waited on the landing as Basho helped the crew unload the wicker baskets. Then each man put a basket on his head and started up the stone steps that led to the fish market. Oh no, said Annie. Look. She pointed toward the other end of the dock. Jack looked. He saw several samurai getting off a boat. Quick, grab a basket, he said. Jack and Annie each picked up a basket of fish. As Jack tried to lift the basket to his head, he tilted it. A couple of fish hit him on the nose as they fell to the dock. Leave them, come on, whispered Annie. Carrying the baskets on their heads, Jack and Annie followed Basho and the fishermen up the steps and delivered their fish to a young woman at one of the tables. Jack glanced back at the river. The samurai were standing on the landing, checking someone's passport. Jack looked at Basho. Basho was watching the samurai too. He turned to the fishermen. Thank you for the ride, he said calmly, bowing to the men. We will walk from here. The fisherman nodded and smiled. Good plan, Jack thought, relieved. Come, said Basho. He led Jack and Annie away from the market. Soon they came to a busy road crowded with pedestrians and travelers on horseback. As they walked along the crowd, Jack remembered Basho's words, seek harmony with your surroundings. He tried to blend in by walking at a steady pace. Keeping his eyes down, he worried about their mission. How will we ever find the secret of happiness, he wondered, if we have to keep dodging the samurai? Look at that bridge, said Annie. Jack glanced up. A high-arched bridge spanned the river. Hundreds of people were walking across it. That is the great bridge, said Basho. It will lead us away from the heart of Edo to the bank of the Samida River, where I live. Great, said Jack. He hoped they would be safer away from the heart of Edo. Then maybe they could focus on their search for the secret. Jack, Annie, and Basho joined the crowd crossing the bridge. They walked single file close to the wooden railing. Jack stared straight ahead, careful not to look anyone in the eye. He saw people having picnics on the other side of the bridge. Kids were flying red kites. What's that mountain? Said Annie. She pointed to a snow-capped mountain looming in the distance. The white cone of the gray mountain rose above fleecy, rose-tinted clouds. That is a volcanic mountain called Mount Fuji, said Basho. Here's a picture. Cool. Oh, I've heard of Mount Fuji, said Jack. That's the highest mountain in Japan, right? Yes, the most beautiful, said Basho. It is beautiful, said Annie. Jack looked around. Actually, he thought everything seemed beautiful at the moment. The green and yellow parasols of the ferry boat passengers below. Wait, hang on. I did not read that right. Actually, he thought everything seemed beautiful at that moment. The green and yellow parasols of the ferry boat passengers below, the pink cherry trees shimmering at the river's edge, the red kites and white seagulls gliding through the sky. I love Japan, Jack said softly. I do too, said Basho. We call our world the floating world, for it seems to float on beauty. It really does, murmured Jack. Walking across the great bridge, he felt as if he himself were floating through the floating world. All right, that was the end of chapter 3. Okay, so we're finally getting into the heart of Japan, and I am excited to hear what you think. Do you think you would want to go to Japan? Maybe put a heart for my bullfrogs that are watching, or any other friends that are watching. Would you want to go to Japan? I would love to go to Japan. I think it's probably a lot different now than it was back then. This doesn't actually give us a specific date. Or yeah, it was the 1600s, wasn't it? Yeah, so yeah, a long time ago. And so I can imagine it's very, very different than it is actually now. But I'm looking to see if I see any hearts pop up. Would you like to go to Tokyo, to Japan? Anybody out there? All right. Well, maybe when you're watching this, some of you that are watching this later after it's been recorded, yeah, 1600s is when this was. You can let me know in the comments below. What do you think you would like to see at Tokyo? And have you ever been to Tokyo? Some of my friends, I have a lot of friends from this last class that are from all over the world. So we had a good time studying about Flat Stanley and writing letters to people. And we got letters from all kinds of countries. And so I wonder if anybody's ever been to Japan from my last bullfrog class. Or anybody that's watching this. Let me know in the comments. That'd be really cool. All right. Well, join me again tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and we're going to read chapter 4 and 5 and possibly 6 as well. But for sure, chapter 4 and 5. And I thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good summer. Keep reading. Bye.